Welcome to Slash Bash, where today I'm bringing you a compilation of some of the best malicious compliance stories of 2021. HR tried to get rid of my dad right before he was able to get his pension. Let's jump right in. My father worked for a Forbes 500 company since the 70s, moved up the ranks as a software engineer in management, has patents for the company that saved it millions of dollars. He's almost to pension age, and suddenly HR starts making his life miserable. He noticed this trend was happening to some of his coworkers when they were getting close to age 60 as well. The HR lady calls him into the office and says that he was not punching in and out at the correct time. My father, an engineer, is very detail-oriented. He knew that these were false accusations and asked HR to prove it. They came back a week later and couldn't prove it, and he said, "Of course you can't. I have been driving the corporate carpool bus from a major city 40 miles away from the company for the last 15 years. I always have 16 witnesses on my clock-in time, and I haven't been late in 15 years. The HR lady came back a week later, and they said that they were going to fire him for letting people into the building without badging. He asked to see when and where he was letting someone into the building without badging. They showed that he held the door for his best friend who had also been working there since the 70s, who had his foot cut off after having type 2 diabetes. He was in a wheelchair. Prior to this, my dad took the chief of security out for lunch and told him about how this company wanted him to leave before he got his pension, so he got some footage of his own. My dad said, "That is very interesting. You are going to fire me for holding the door for my best friend of 35 years after his foot was amputated and he was in a wheelchair. Fine. Then I hope you fire the CEO and yourself as well." He then proceeded to show footage of the HR lady holding the door for his friend and the CEO holding the door for his friend. My father ended up staying there until he got his pension. Edit number 1. I don't know his finances, and he probably wouldn't have lost the whole pension, but there was a definite financial difference from being fired prior to reaching age 60 and making it to age 60. Edit number 2. So this blew up so much that my brother, who didn't know I was on Reddit, texted me and said, "You are Reddit famous. That's a story about Dad. I knew this was you." Also, some of you are wondering why a software engineer would have to clock in and out. Well, he didn't. I meant to use the word badge in and out of the building. They went that far, to talk with security to see his badge timestamps. There are more things that led to this getting bad, and I didn't want to write pages and pages, but it definitely escalated to this point. Lastly, for those of you that have been saying that my dad must have worked there as a child, this whole thing happened roughly 9 years ago. My father is 68 right now. If you want to know what company it was, this sentence is the most general hint I can give you, but it may drive people from that company to be mad at me. Final update, Dad quit that job a while ago and made his own company in his retirement. He has used his own money to patent a new invention that desalinates seawater and provides clean solar energy. He has patents for this in America, India, and China, and is looking for some capital to provide clean water and power to third world countries. If interested in helping him build his first power plant, please send me a message. An inexperienced software engineer takes on his first project. It's big, unwieldy, and has an impossible deadline. But he works hard, does his best, and so is surprised to find his salary is going to be cut in half. He can accept it or find another job. Guess how he chose? Let's jump right in. This takes place near the very beginning of my software engineering career, back in 05 or 06. I'd just been let go from my previous place of employment due to being compliant with directives I'd been given, although not maliciously, so that story wouldn't be appropriate here sadly, and thus working myself out of a job. I was a young college dropout from a technical college that hadn't been federally accredited yet, and thus all my student loans were from banks and loan companies instead of from Uncle Sam, and debts were due. I was also making payments on my very first car, even though it was a beater that the prior owners had already nearly driven into the ground. 4 years old and nearly 200,000 miles on it when I bought it, and of course rent and utilities. The job I'd just been let go from already had me working paycheck to paycheck as they paid far under average rate, but I was still new professional, so I couldn't be very choosy. I was living in Los Angeles County, so the cost of living was so bad I was having to choose which bills were going to be late on a monthly basis. Specifically, I was living in a town called San Pedro, a small town tucked fairly out of the way. After blasting my resume to all the job boards, I get a call from a startup who seems interested in my resume and wants me to come in for a face-to-face interview, skipping the call screen entirely. In my desperation, I agree. I'm given an address which is all the way up in Woodland Hills. I check the internet, 55-minute drive so long as there's no traffic. With traffic, it looked like a commute that will be more like an hour and 45 minutes each way. I'm desperate though, and literally nobody else has reached out to me about my resume or responded to my applications, so I go to the interview. I arrive to a mostly empty office complex, maybe 6 or 7 other cars in a parking lot capable of holding at least 50. I go into the building mentioned in the address and call the phone number I was given to let them know I'd arrived. Enter Chad. Chad comes to meet me and seems excited that I've come. He escorts me through the building to an office. Mind you, as far as I can see, we're the only 2 humans in the building. He gives me the pitch for the company, tells me he built the software being sold, but it's not scalable and needs someone who can rewrite it. After we go through the whole interview song and dance, he offers me the job on the spot. The pay is marginally higher than the last gig, so I figure gas would be covered for the commute. I agree and we shake hands, as I'm going to be starting the next Monday. Red flags start appearing from the very first minute I arrive on Monday. First, I'm given a tour which consists of the 14 by 14 foot office I'm going to be sharing with Chad, as well as another engineer who's going to be starting the following Monday. I'm not a fan of having someone able to look over my shoulder, it makes me nervous. I ask why each engineer's desk has 2 computers. Because the one you will be writing code on doesn't have internet access for security purposes. Note, this was pure paranoia. There was nothing about this software that required such tight security. We weren't doing any government contracts or anything of the sort. Then I'm escorted clear across the building to meet with the Chief Executive Officer, Richard, and the IT guy, Eddie, and the sales and support team. I'm told that half of the team is supporting the existing version of the application, 2 people are selling the existing version to new clients or trying to, and 1 person is explicitly tasked with selling the new version, the one I haven't even started on yet. I'm still young and dumb at this point, but even I know this means the salesperson is probably giving out a date when the customer should expect their purchase to be filled. It's a good thing you started when we did. We've been telling customers it'll be ready in June. Did I mention all this was happening in February? Apparently, I've agreed to rewrite, test, and package an entire application I've never seen before in approximately 4 months. So tour being done, I sit down and get to work. After jumping through a bunch of hoops of getting the software I prefer downloaded onto the actual work machine, as well as the code, I set about reviewing code so horrific I've not seen its like since. There isn't a single comment in the entire thing. Before I can even ask a single question of the CTO, however, he tells me he's headed to downtown LA to scalp his tickets to the Lakers game and that he'll see me tomorrow. So now I'm alone in the office with this abomination, a machine that's been hamstrung to heck and back, and the only thing I've got to console me is the fact that at least I'm employed again. Fast forward a week, I've documented the bulk of the code, because there wasn't any, and the boss and I do not get along. He's mad because I've not written any substantial code, and I'm frustrated because I'm trying to understand a lot of what specific code is trying to do, and he's routinely leaving around noon to go sell his tickets for Lakers games, or just not in the office because he's chatting with someone else. When he is in the office, I show him my documentation and try to get him to verify it or describe the purpose of code where all I can say is, "What?" By the end of the week, I've covered about 30% of the project in a wiki-like document, and I've taken to leaving after sunset so that I can A, get more done, B, have a shorter commute, and C, drive when my car isn't an oven. The air conditioning didn't work. I've barely managed to convince the CTO that what I'm doing is necessary so the engineer starting the next Monday doesn't have to do anywhere near the same crap I've got, which would make us a more efficient team. Monday arrives and in comes Big Bro. I called him this because he was a much more experienced engineer than I was. We spend the first day with him getting set up, then us reviewing what I've documented. He manages to answer some questions the CTO never did, just because he is that much better, and I start to feel more confident. Over the next weeks, Big Bro took me under his wing as an engineer, teaching me best practices, standards, and where my plans were good and where they could be better. If it hadn't been for him, I'd have gone insane. I end up joining him outside for smoke breaks even though I don't smoke, just so I can get a breath of non-office air. He and I discuss the project, and we also make friends with Eddie, who makes us laugh by telling us horror stories about the CTO and CEO. Apparently, he was a school friend of theirs and basically worked with them because they paid him to do something he felt was super easy. April rolls around. I've got a special occasion I need the day off for, which happens to be a Wednesday that year. I'd advised him when I first started, and he'd been cool with it. I remind him on April 2nd, since I had an irrational fear of policy decisions being made on April Fool's Day, and he loses it. He goes off on a rant and straight up informs me that he regrets hiring me, claiming I didn't have the skills I told him I did, and wasn't worth what I was being paid. We're definitely not halfway done, more like 1/3, and it's already been decided that June is a lost cause and that we're shooting for August now. That habit I started before of leaving after the sun went down, yeah, that never stopped. I was arriving at 9 a.m. every day and leaving around 10 p.m. every night, trying my best. Big Bro was the same, and Eddie would stay late with us just because we liked hanging out together. So it should be understandable that I was very close to losing it right back at him. In a strained yet diplomatic voice, I told him that if he put in the same amount of work to help us as we put in to rewrite his code, we'd probably be a lot closer to done than we were, especially given the 12-hour days. He was not a fan of that and switched up to straight up yelling, blaming us for the lost sales and refunds due to the delays, and that the only way he'd get off our backs was by getting the project done. This entire time, Big Bro is just sitting there and says nothing to back me up. Chad then left the office for a bit, and I just declared I was taking my lunch and would be back in an hour. I felt frustrated by Chad and betrayed by Big Bro, who I felt, rightly or not, should have had my back since we were in the same boat. When we were both back in the office, he apologized for yelling and told me that since he agreed when I was hired, I could have my day off. Cool, I apologized too, although not for anything specific. I just didn't want to talk to him anymore and figured that was the fastest way to end the conversation. Fast forward to June and the opportunity for Malicious Compliance. Over the last 2 months, Chad has been getting worse and worse. He's yelling nearly every day and still leaving early too. Big Bro and Eddie are also feeling the pain. Nobody is safe from his ego. The smoke breaks and afternoon evening portions of our day are when we're most productive, as nobody can focus until Chad leaves. The first Monday in June rolls around, and Chad invites me to go on a walk outside for a one-on-one meeting. I figure I'm being fired. At this point, we've had to refactor the rewrite almost entirely due to missing a critical chunk of functionality, and we're still only 60% done. August release is looking less and less sure. Chad informs me that he's hired a third engineer, but in order to stay in the budget to pay him, he's cutting my salary in half. I stop on the spot and just give him a blank look. "Are you serious?" I asked. "I'm barely able to pay for my bills and the gas required to commute here as it is. If you cut my salary at all, I won't be able to afford to live." At this point, the idea of cutting my productivity to help ramp up a new engineer so he can help us meet the deadline doesn't even occur to me. Although in hindsight, that would have also been a pretty major issue. Chad brushes me off. "That's not my problem. The fact that you missed one deadline and look like you're gonna miss another is. If you've got a problem with that, you're more than welcome to go find another job. The new guy starts in 2 weeks." And with that, he walks inside. I'd just been told that I had 2 weeks left of my job at my current salary. Cool. So that day I do something I hadn't done since I first started. I left while the sun was still up. Specifically, I left at 5 p.m. I drove my oven car, no working air conditioner, and a car that had been left in the sun all day in Woodland Hills had me feeling like a baked potato, through traffic, hour-and-a-half commute home through LA heat, and updated my resume before reactivating my account on all the job sites. I'm contacted the next day by a potential new employer and I get an interview scheduled. I decide to tell Big Bro about the new opportunity and he hits me with news that lets me know just how small a world we live in. Hey Big Bro, just for your information, I've started looking for a new job. I've already got an interview lined up. Really? Where? Over at this company. Wow, that's where I worked before I came here. That place is pretty awesome and I left there on pretty good terms. I know the CTO there, go ahead and use me as a reference. Really? Okay. Turns out Big Bro was true to his word, and the CTO and I even talked about Big Bro during the interview. Apparently they'd already talked about me and Big Bro had been the ultimate hype man, confirming everything I said about why I was looking for a new job and everything. All goes well and I'm electronically signing an offer letter that Friday afternoon. Chad had already left for the day, so there was nobody to look over my shoulder as I used the work computer that had internet access to get this done. At the new job, the commute is cut by more than half and comes with a pretty significant raise. I tell Big Bro and Eddie on the last smoke break, I still don't smoke, that I'm done and I found something new. Oddly enough, they both smile and just wish me luck. No hard feelings, hope we stay in touch. Odd, but I'd stopped really caring about anything related to that job, so I paid it no mind. I went back inside, packed up my stuff into my backpack, and walked to the CEO's office. Hey Richard, got a minute? Hey OP, what's up? Just wanted to let you know I found a new job, so I'm moving on. Really? Why? We need you! You guys decided it was cool to cut my salary to a point where I couldn't afford to live. Chad said if I didn't like it, I should look for something new, so I did. Richard looked defeated. Well, when's your last day? Today. Richard is now pissed. We need you here to train the new guy who starts soon. Hey, I had to train myself and to an extent Big Bro when he first started. The new guy should be able to as well. And with that, I left for greener pastures. The unexpected huge fallout. 4 months later, Big Bro texts me to ask me how things are going. I tell him things are great, and we schedule a lunchtime call because apparently things have gone sideways in a huge way. Part 1. Apparently Chad came in on Monday almost violently angry and demands Eddie re-image my work machine first thing in the morning, which erases everything I'd left on there. Big Bro comes in an hour later and he and Chad discuss the new timeline for the project. Somewhere in there apparently, Big Bro asks Chad to log into the admin account on my old work machine so he can pull the documents I'd accumulated about the planned architecture, the existing code, meeting notes, etc. Chad answers by apparently punching a hole in the wall and leaving for the day at 10:30 in the morning, probably to go to the hospital to deal with his hand. Big Bro then spends the rest of that week ostensibly working on recreating the documentation from scratch. Part 2. When I asked how the new guy handled the new documentation, Big Bro laughed and told me there never was any documentation. Apparently, he and Eddie had become really good friends in the months we worked there, to the point where they'd become roommates about a month before I left. More than that though, they decided to start a freelance consulting business together and only had to decide on when to make that their full-time jobs. Neither of them liked Chad much and wanted to make their departure hurt as much as possible. So they decided to make Big Bro's last day the day before the new guy starts, and Eddie would quit shortly afterwards, sticking around just long enough to watch the bomb go off. Did I mention Big Bro never told Chad he was quitting? Yeah, he just didn't show up that Monday. He had, however, emailed that documentation he'd spent a week writing to Chad. Turns out he wasn't documenting the code at all. He'd spent a week writing a letter explaining in excruciating detail why Chad was such a bad boss, and he'd emailed it to everyone in the company. I asked if he still had it so I could read it, and he sent it to me after the call. Thankfully, Like the big helper he was, Eddie had ensured that the new guy's email was set up and in the proper groups before the email was sent, so the guy's first email in the company was a novella about the kind of person he agreed to work for. Apparently, Chad thought it was appropriate to take his frustration out on the new guy, who'd already read a significant portion of the email before Chad shoved him away from his desk and deleted it. Apparently, new guy promptly decided, and rightfully so, that agreeing to work for Chad had been a mistake, packed up his things, and quit on the spot. Part 3. With the new guy quitting, the August deadline was now little more than a dream within a dream, which according to Eddie doesn't stop Chad and Richard from trying to find that miracle rock star engineer who can save them from their own situation, which given what they were offering as pay didn't exist. So time advances in its unstoppable way. August arrives and customers find that they've paid for something that hasn't been delivered yet, and pretty much unanimously demand refunds, with a few customers bringing legal action against them. With the amount they have to refund and the money they now need for legal fees because of the way they'd incorporated, they were personally liable. They could no longer afford to pay anyone and were forced to shutter the business. When HR cuts the $500 petty cash fund, they don't expect it will cost them $12 grand. Let's jump right in. I worked as a patrol supervisor for a high-end security company. That was before the company was sold and then driven into the ground by new owners. Now let me explain some things that are relevant to the story. Only supervisors got salary. Our normal working week was 48 hours, 4 12-hour days. Anything over that, we got hour for hour paid time off in lieu of normal vacation. Our contract stated that if a supervisor worked any position that wasn't as the supervisor on duty, they were to be paid an hourly rate based on their average hourly salary rate. The contract stated two more important things. First, that the company can buy the paid time off for 85% or more of its value if the employee agrees. Said employee can also offer to sell it back for any amount. And 2, contracts are valid for 1 year. If the employer wants to renegotiate before that time, the employer has to pay so much for each month the contract is still valid for. Not the exact phrasing, it's been a while, but you get the idea. For clarity, we were 5 months into our current contract at the time. Now the owner, I'll call John, was awesome. He expected a lot, but he treated everyone well. Gave his supervisors almost free rein, made sure officers had the best equipment to protect themselves, and was just generally a good guy. So we didn't give him much flack over little things. Now we asked for, and he gave, the supervisors a discretionary fund for our officers. On most nights we have an on-call officer, some nights we didn't. If we needed to call someone in, we could say, "Hey, come in and work and I'll buy you lunch." Or, "You want to come in but don't have the gas to get to your region and back? Meet me at this gas station and I will buy you some gas." Little things to keep the supervisors from having to work regions and do our jobs, plus it made everyone happy. Normal cost was around $450 to $500 a month, but saved the company thousands. He wanted a low turnover company and found ways to keep experienced people applying and staying with the company. Enter the new HR rep, Mary. Well, she calls a meeting with us supervisors. She has some things she needs to discuss. So the next morning, me and my fellow 2 supervisors show up. On the table was an end to the discretionary fund. It cost the company too much, she said, and stuck to it even after we explained how it saved money. Also, without going into specifics, Mary said we had to work exactly like our employment contract stated, no deviating. Also, any requests for promotions among the officers needed to be approved by her, though to her we were just a payroll number. There were also a bunch of other things designed to put herself between us and John to become our boss. Now, none of us had ever really read the whole contract, so at the end we went over it without her. Turns out there are loopholes we could drive a truck through, but legally valid. Now, we could have taken this to John, but we knew he would say to give it a chance, so we did. Seeing we were salary, our pay period was monthly, 30 days, instead of weekly. We also knew John didn't read certain emails or payroll until the end of the month, so we set out to do exactly as she asked. Stick to the contract. So we each worked our 48 hours and other days of the week. I ended up working 24 days out of that month, my normal 48 hours as a supervisor plus an additional 24 to 36 hours a week as a region patrol officer. Mostly because without our fund, it was getting almost impossible to get people to come in on their days off. We split it up, but I did the majority. So we submitted forms for not only paid time off for those extra shifts, but a pay request for hourly for each extra shift, which for me was $18.75 an hour for each one. I never went into hourly overtime for the week. At the end of 27 days, I accumulated over 100 hours of paid time off from the extra shifts and for going overtime on my supervisor shifts. John was added to the email also, but the subject was end of the month forms, which means he wouldn't read them until the end of the month to verify that the figures Mary gave him were correct. In other words, we double dipped like an SOB that month. Now fast forward 27 days after the meeting and John sends us an email stating he was aware of the situation and scheduled a meeting for 8 a.m. the next day. We get in there and he doesn't look happy, but Mary looked smug, so we got worried it might have backfired until John started. It went like this. Gentlemen, Mary told me about your meeting. She didn't discuss it with me first or I would have stopped it. I also know if you would have come to me, I would have said to try it out. First, HR will never be in charge of the supervisors. You work for me and me alone. Then he holds up 3 envelopes and hands them out. Here is your hourly pay for being region officers this month. Your normal pay comes at the normal time. Also, he hands out another envelope to each of us. This is my attempt to buy back all your paid time off you have gained this month at 90%. If you don't accept, give me the check back. But none of us did. Now, here is another check each for the contract buyout, and I will have a new one ready in the morning. I have also refilled and reactivated the cards for your discretionary fund, so use it as needed. And if you run out before the end of the month, email me. He then looks over at Mary and says, So Mary, how much did your idea save the company? $500, John. John replies, No, Mary, it costs the company $12,000. That's what those checks total. Sure, SpongeBob got the lion's share, but the man is a work animal. It still cost me $12,000. Then Mary said something that I'm sure she got fired for. She said, Come on, John, it's just words on a piece of paper and not really legally binding. Besides, the use of loopholes in a contract is illegal. That got us all staring at her. We may not have attended business school, but we are smart enough to know she was not only wrong, but dead wrong. Yeah, the next day John sent out an email saying the position was open and anyone interested to send in their resumes. P.S. The only changes to our contract was adding that we could get paid time off or our hourly rate. In story 2, when the boss says not to do extra work outside my role, I am happy to oblige. Allow me to start by painting a picture. This was about 3 years ago. I was working in the bakery of a local high-end grocer, think gourmet Whole Foods, and had been there for 3 years. What started as a college job for a semester turned out to be a longer-term thing. I loved the work, the customers, and my coworkers. That is, until the final month there. I was online for a promotion to assistant manager. In my time there, I had been passed over for different promotions for people that were more favorable for the company image. When the position came up, I was the only person across the company that applied. I thought I was a shoo-in and had been led to believe that it was as good as mine. The old assistant manager was transferring to a higher position and took extra time to train me before leaving. Weeks passed and I heard no news. No one in my department was getting an answer for when I'd be given the step up. That was until someone elsewhere asked us when the new assistant manager was transferring in from another store. Turns out that my boss's boss, we'll call him Greg, decided that I was a terrible fit and went above her to push someone into the role, someone that didn't want it and hadn't been trained for it. I complained to someone higher up saying I should have at least been told that the decision was reversed. No word came and the new assistant manager started. It only took a couple days to realize that she had barely worked in the bakery and had not been trained for her position. She also seemed to target me, assuming that I didn't know how to do the most basic things we did. I later found out that Greg told her I was a problem employee and needed to be watched closely and given guidance. Out of the blue, our manager was given the boot and replaced. She had no warning. We had no warning, and suddenly someone from a completely different store and department was in her position. This person had no clue how to do the job, and with the training that the old assistant manager gave me, I took over most of the day-to-day tasks. Greg came in one day and threw a fit that I was doing inventory. He said that I had no place acting like I was in charge and doing jobs that weren't meant for people like me. Fine. Inventory not getting done. Dating and tossing old products, not my problem now. Helping customers with issues and complaints, let me grab the manager instead. Make sure things are filed and ordered when needed? No thanks. I started doing the bare minimum. Took all of my breaks, clocked in exactly when my shift was scheduled, and left exactly when it ended, no matter what I was doing. They didn't want me to go outside my station, then I wouldn't. Easy days for me. Suddenly, issues popped up left and right, and our new management was scrambling to figure things out. I told them nothing, since it wasn't my place to teach them how to do their jobs. This all came to an end when I was called into a meeting with the store manager. We'll call him Rob. Greg has told me that you've had a lot of issues lately. I bet he has. I'm just doing my job now like he told me to. Well, he told your manager to stop scheduling you after today. He wanted me to tell you. Are you firing me? No. Greg said that you won't be scheduled, but you may be used as an emergency call-in during the holidays. I'm not working, but I'm not fired. This is BS. I agree, but he's above me when it comes to what happens in your department. Alright, I'll finish today, but after that, I'm done. This is some stupid work politics, and I'm not playing this game with him. I kept my word and finished my shift without complaint. As soon as the end hit, I walked away and clocked out. That's when I told my coworkers what had happened during that meeting. I bid them farewell and walked out. The next morning, I was woken up before sunrise by a call from Greg. He said that almost everyone in our department had quit overnight and he needed me in to open. I reminded him that he didn't want me there, so I quit. He demanded I return and help train a new team, so I did what anyone would do. I told him to do it himself, go flip himself, and hung up. Last I heard from a few friends that are still with the company, our department didn't ever really recover all the way. People still talk about how we all left together one day. If you see this and recognize the story, flip you, Greg. When they tell you that you aren't qualified for a promotion, then it is time to stop doing the job. Let's jump right in. A few years ago, I worked for a furniture store in the back of the store. My job consisted of unloading and loading trucks, assembling furniture, and placing it on the main floor of the store. After around 6 months there, my supervisor announced he resigned, meaning his post was up for grabs. I had all the technical requirements, so I applied, but they gave the job to another one of my colleagues who had more experience, which was totally reasonable. After maybe 1 year, my then supervisor just stopped coming into work for no reason. He just decided he had had enough and he just left, no 2 weeks notice or anything. So while the director tried to get to him, I took over the role of supervisor. I was the one with the most experience. Which means that combined with my regular work, I was now the one telling people what to do, when, doing the schedule, and all the paperwork for the shipment. 3 weeks later, my colleague was officially fired by my director. In those 3 weeks, I kept doing the job of supervisor and doing it pretty well, so I thought that the promotion would come to me, but my director did nothing. I went to see him, explained what I had been doing, and asked if I got the promotion too, which he answered that I was not qualified nor smart enough to do this job. After some thinking, I just decided that if I was not smart enough to do the job, then I shouldn't do it. So I went back to doing my regular job, and I also started looking for something else. 4 to 5 days after I stopped filling in, my director came to see me in the back of store asking why the flip the job isn't being done. After all, without me to organize it, nothing was getting out of the store to be delivered to the client. I just reminded him of our previous meeting, and he told me, "Yeah, I remembered that. What I meant is you're not qualified to get the pay bonus for the job. You still have to do the job, you idiot." I have to admit I still wonder how he thought that would work. Still a bit dumbfounded, I just told him that if I wasn't going to get paid for it, I certainly won't do the job, and that considering we were already short staff, with my old supervisor gone, he should be a bit more polite. Apparently, this was an unreasonable request, a total lack of respect to him, and worthy of firing me. Yep, I still don't get how that would fix anything, but hey, he's the boss. I packed everything and left knowing that the back of store, which needed 5 people to operate, was now down to 3, with the most experienced worker having a total of 4 months. It only took my boss one day to call me back to say maybe he went overboard and that perhaps we could arrange something for the promotion. To which I replied that I already had a few interviews lined up and so I would not be coming back. I hung up while he was still cussing at me. After a few months at my new job, I heard some surprising news. 2 other back of store employees resigned and soon after, the store had closed down. Gotta admit that it felt good to see my old boss finally get what he deserved. Story 2. My boss says I am not the office manager. Fine. Then who needs electricity? When I was doing my articles at a small law firm, internship to be admitted as an attorney, I was the go-to person for everything at the office, setting up computers, buying stationery, paying bills, going to court, seeing clients, etc. After being admitted as an attorney, I continued doing all this because the secretary only did about 20% of what a secretary would usually do and refused to do anything else. My boss does some shady business, don't pay taxes, etc., so he couldn't just fire her for fear of her ratting him out. He also never disciplined her. We are not in the US. Since we worked from my boss's mother's house, the secretary also spent about 50% of her day just chatting to his mother, and they became fast friends. Guess who was always the evil one that everyone ganged up on? Yours truly. I was made out to be incompetent at my job, and I used to cry a lot and almost became an alcoholic from work stress. One day the secretary got really upset with me after I asked her to buy stationery since we didn't even have staples, and after a heated argument told me that I'm not the office manager and should stop lording it about as if I was. Bear in mind, I was her senior both as an attorney and in number of years working at the firm. My boss did nothing and rather got upset with me, and so did his mother. I decided then and there that I am done doing both secretary work and my attorney work because I was working roughly 50 to 60 hours per week, the standard is 40, trying to get everything done without receiving extra pay. The unemployment rate in my country is around 30%, and in the legal field supply of lawyers exceeds demand. She knew this and my boss knew this, but no one cared that I was basically working myself into an early grave. Cue malicious compliance. If everyone agrees that I am not the office manager, then I will stop managing the flow of the office and only do my attorney work. I stopped paying the bills, buying the stationery, reminding my boss of important meetings, etc. Within 2 weeks, the electricity was cut off for 10 days because it wasn't paid, and my boss's elderly mother and the rest of his family had no electricity. We could also not work for those 10 days. Once the electricity went on, the phone lines were cut because of non-payment. We could, again, not work. The post piled up, there was no stationery. We couldn't do service of court documents because our service providers cut us off. It went on for weeks. I simply worked around the issues and sorted my life out. One example, when the Wi-Fi was off, I used my cell phone to hotspot my laptop without telling anyone. In the end, my boss and his mother begged me to do what I used to do, but I refused. Since I was focusing more on my actual work, my fees increased and my pay increased as well. Shortly thereafter, I moved away from that office to our secondary office and worked alongside lovely colleagues who all did what they got paid to do. I have been at this new office, same firm, just a different location, for the last 2 years. In story number 3, the party is over, but we still want pizza. This took place in the very late 80s or early 90s pre-internet. We had a very large multi-line BBS system and with some text games and robust chat rooms where a lot of people hung out and used it as the central hub of their social lives. A lot of us met and hung out in person on weekends, and there were also lots of parties. And that's already more backstory than you need, but apparently forum rules say I have to include some sort of setup. One Saturday, we have a pool party that was pretty large. We decided to order pizza from a local 24-hour place that was famous for having great brick oven square pizza. We ordered something like 10 to 12 large pizzas very early on. We even confirmed they were okay handling an order that big. Hours go by, several phone calls asking where the pizzas are, excuses about how they had messed them all up, really, all of them? And had to start over, but eventually, more than 8 hours after we ordered, they show up. Most of the people had left by then, and there were now way too many pizzas. We ask if we can just take half of them. The delivery guy says he has to call his boss. He comes in and uses the phone. I hear him telling his boss how after all those hours people have left and that we only wanted half of the order. Boss says, no, tell him it's all or none. Fine then, none it is. Sorry dude, bye. There we are starving. Some ideas are thrown out about what was open on that side of town, where we could go, etc. I had my heart set on that pizza place, so I suggested we go there. There was some confusion at the suggestion. Haha, yeah, that would be hilarious if we all just rolled up and, wait, you're serious? I was serious, but nobody was calling me Shirley. We went. As we are piling into the restaurant, the delivery guy spots us and whispers to his boss while pointing at us. The boss gave us the evil eye the entire time we were in there, but that was okay. The pizzas were great. You are stealing commissions. You don't actually sell. Let's jump right in. I'm a service writer for a vehicle maintenance repair shop. I have the capability to actually do the work, but I make more money for my company in sales, services, and parts. So my job started when I came in 2 years ago from a different company. They hired me because not only can I sell, but I can complete the services that I sell. Fast forward about 6 months and they are so impressed with my sales that they inform me that I'm only to perform the work if there's absolutely no other technicians available to complete the job within a timely manner. I would still be receiving my bonus for sales, as the name implies, sales bonus. Great. So I get on it. I'm breaking records, bringing in new clients, teaching others to sell like I do. I'm making good money. Fast forward a bit more and they transfer me to another location where I'm quickly outshining their top service writer who was never given the order to only sell. I'm still expected to just sell. I checked when I was transferred. Shortly thereafter, said other service writer decides to get in touch with the owners and say that I'm stealing commissions. The way commission works is this. Service writer, whoever sells the job or part, gets some. Person performing the job gets some. So if you do both, you get more on that specific job. Pause here for a note. Well, I'm doing my sales job long-term by now. I've informed customers on previous visits that they are coming up due for such and such services. They come back and ask for me because, let's face it, I know my stuff, to get said services completed on schedule. Thus, they're coming in requesting services. Returning to the complaint that I'm stealing, the other service writer complained that because I'm not actually doing the work, I shouldn't receive any commission at all for services. He backs it up with the fact that customers are coming in requesting services, and therefore I'm not actually doing any actual selling, simply benefiting from customers crossing my path who are asking for commissionable services. Keep in mind, these are customers I've reached already and put in for future sales, on top of new sales that I work for on the spot as well. The owner decided to take his side. Thus, my new job description is to simply service right. No commission, don't perform services, customer service only. You don't actually sell. These customers come in asking for these services, so you shouldn't benefit from this. Again, I'm fully aware that these are my previous customers, whom I've given heads up that they will soon be due for a certain service, but I keep my mouth shut. Alrighty then, I won't actually sell. I work for a bit of spare income. My husband is a wonderful mechanic who works at my original store, and he makes the big bucks in flag hours. Within a month, sales and services dropped dramatically, as customers weren't coming in requesting commissionable services, and I'm no longer pushing sales at all. Why make them money if I'm not also making money? I'm not even allowed to perform the services, so there's no way that I can make commission at this point. Sometime later, the owner drops in wanting to know why the store suddenly stopped making sales. So I told him, I don't actually sell, so my commission stopped coming in, sir. A good meeting with the other service writer later, and I moved back to my other store. Redeemed of any accusations of theft, with a raise, commissions are back to the way they used to be, and my sales have never been better. The other service writer? He's just a technician now, not even allowed to work with the customers at all. Maybe a small victory, but a victory all the same. Go to the tenancy tribunal? If you say so. New Zealand has some particularly predatory property managers. Their prey is university students and young families who live in our bigger cities. There are stories in our news quite frequently about how poorly they treat tenants. I spent my 20s living in rental properties in Wellington. Most of the houses I lived in were super damp, mold-ridden crap heaps. They were also super expensive. They are even worse now. Fortunately, New Zealand has a fantastic tenancy tribunal who are sick of property managers preying on young people who do not have a lot of money. When I was about 28, my now wife and I found a beautiful house in a suburb called Berhampore, close to the city, quiet area, near a bus stop, plenty of space including a pretty garden in the back, and most importantly, not expensive. A perfect house. Just before we moved in, I took about 200 photos of the house. I'd become very weary of how easily property managers could rake a tenant over the coals for damage, garbage, etc. the previous tenant had left behind. We spent about a year and a half living there without incident. We had to report to the property manager that trash had been left under the house by the previous tenants, and they dealt with it well. When we needed to install high-speed broadband, they were easy to deal with and everything seemed to be going swimmingly. About 4 months prior to the end of our lease, I was offered a brewing job in the United States. I informed our property manager that we would need to break our lease earlier than expected, to which she replied, "No problem. Let's arrange a time to meet." Prior to meeting with her, I researched her company's policy on moving out of rental properties prior to the agreed date. The company policy was that if a tenant broke the agreement early, then the tenant would have to pay $750 to the property manager. This was supposedly to cover the listing fee. I should mention at this point that listing properties in Wellington was not challenging nor expensive. Most properties were filled within a week. Some property managers were even expecting people to show up with cash to cover bond plus first month's rent when they were having viewings of the property. There was no way that $750 was going towards just the listing fee. When I went into our meeting, I told her that we were willing to ensure the property was cleaner than when we arrived, and also we were willing to offer an extra $200 for moving out prior to the lease ending. At that point, she showed me the company policy, which stated leaving prior to the end of the agreed lease date would mean a $750 fee for us as the tenants. I acted flabbergasted, as one would to hear of this shocking news. At this point, our property manager explained to me that the tenants before my wife and I were in a similar situation and had left prior to the agreed date. I explained to her that this was extortion and I thought it was incredibly unfair. I repeated to her that we had offered her $200 to help with relisting the property and that we were willing to list it ourselves. I also said to her that it was ridiculous to think that it would cost more than $100 to list and fill that property. She explained to me that is what the tenants before you did, paid the $750, and that's just what everyone does. To which I replied, just because everyone else does it doesn't mean it's right. We argued some more and left it unresolved. On my way out of her office, she said, if this is still an issue, you should get in touch with the tenancy tribunal. With the rage of 1,000 suns and the ability to bottle emotions like a true Catholic, I managed to respond, I'll do that. As soon as I got home, I went on the tenancy tribunal website and filed a complaint against the company she represented. Within a day, the tribunal had agreed to help me and contacted the property manager. In turn, she emailed me begging for mercy. If you agree to drop the complaint, we won't charge you anything. The owner is very disappointed, but if you leave the house in a good state, there will be no more issues. We're not absolute trash, so of course we cleaned the place thoroughly. We moved out without paying them a dime, but the real reward came when I saw her in the city and greeted her with a big smile and wave. I didn't think that I had the power of invisibility, but she didn't seem to see me at all. Here's an edit for all of you getting upset about us signing the lease knowing that we didn't. It wasn't included in the agreement, and also, chill out. This is a story of malicious compliance. I'm not trying to pretend I'm some amazing person who fought for equality and justice for all. Just hit my car and we're even, okay? This one is short and sweet. I went to the grocery store and after buying all of my stuff, I went to the parking lot. As I was getting close to my car, another one parked next to mine and opened the door wide open, hitting my car. Hey, you just hit my car. The butthole just turned around and said, just hit my car and we're even, okay? And walked away. Luckily, there was a security guard nearby and I asked him if he witnessed what the guy said. The security guard just said, yep, and turned away. He knew what was coming. I pretty much gathered all of my strength and kicked his door so hard with the bottom of my foot that I left a huge dent across his entire driver's door. Then I just got into my car and left. I never got a citation or a ticket. I was never even contacted about it. My meal must be salt-free. This story is from a dinner party I hosted before the pandemic. I invited 6 folks, and shortly after the invites were sent, I received a call from Sally. Sally, not her real name, advised me that she was now on a salt-free diet due to medical reasons. She advised that at home, she cooked without any salt and gave me a speech about how wonderful salt-free life was. I was skeptical and advised her that I would personally find it difficult to give up all salt. Was she sure she wasn't just on a low-sodium diet? Sally advised that unless her dish was salt-free, she wouldn't be attending. While telling her no was an option, I'm not that person. See my previous Malicious Compliance. I was pissed off at Sally for years of being difficult at the dinner table in restaurants. Trust me, there was always something wrong with her meal, or its preparation, or the flavor, or the waiter, or... With a smile so large you could hear it through the phone, I assured her that her request for salt-free was 100% going to be accommodated. On the dinner night, I prepped the meal. Sally was getting the same thing as everyone else, with one critical difference. All of her food was prepped in separate containers, baked on separate racks, and seasoned with exactly the same flavors, sans salt. Dinner time and my guests arrived. I have all of Sally's food plated on white plates. Everyone else gets gray plates. First round, appetizers, fried calamari with a lemon jalapeno butter sauce. This dish typically has salt in both the batter and the sauce. As Sally couldn't have that, I battered her calamari in salt-free seasonings and flour. Her condiment looked exactly the same, but was made with unsalted butter and no added salt. I placed Sally's plate in front of her first, and she immediately states she asked for salt-free. I assure her that her dish is salt-free, and I made sure to cook hers separate and even use a different colored plate to keep it straight. We all sit to talk and enjoy the squid. Sally takes a bite and makes a face. "Mine has no flavor," she exclaims. All of my other guests tell Sally it's divine, delicious, best they've ever had, etc. I smile at Sally and assure her that her dish was flavored exactly as everyone else. The only difference is that she received absolutely no salt. It's at this point that Sally has a moment of clarity. It's painfully obvious on her face. She realizes she can't complain about the lack of salt as she's already told the table about her salt-free life. She also can't claim it tastes terrible if everyone else is raving about the food. She literally looks like she was about to cry at the table. As my guests enjoy their dinner, Sally is slowly doing the toddler plays with her food, munch, and pushing her calamari around the plate. After a few moments, she reaches for the sauce that I made for everyone else. "Sally, be careful, the salt-free sauce is in the white bowl. That one has salt." She mumbles something about wanting to taste the difference before literally dumping the bowl on her calamari. She then exclaims how much better it tasted. You and I know that, of course, things taste better with salt. So this drama repeated itself over the main course of honey roasted salmon with pine nuts. I'm also no heathen and had both salt and pepper on the table for my guests. I'm not going to judge you for needing more flavor. Here we go. Sally again takes a bite of her fish and once again realizes that it has no salt. She reaches for the salt shaker and conversation stops. Another guest asks Sally if she was okay with adding salt to her food. She says that she can occasionally have salt. She then proceeds to shower her fish with salt sprinkles. I also baked some cookies for dessert. The dough uses a little salt. I made sure to whip up a separate batch of cookies wrapped to go for her. Salt-free, of course. When I handed her those cookies, the look of defeat that hit her face warmed my heart. Dinner is over, everyone is happy except for Sally. I called her the next week to make sure she was okay, as she'd consumed sodium at my party. Sally told me her doctor has removed her sodium restrictions and she won't need that accommodation at future meals. On the phone, I congratulate her for her good health. When I hang up, I laugh until my sides hurt. Salt-free life apparently doesn't taste good when the salt is actually omitted. Note to any on a low or no sodium diet for their health, I commend you. Sally, however, wasn't actually on this diet. This is evidenced by her shock at how salt-free food tasted. I confirmed with her husband that she's never stopped using salt at home. Her salt-free claims were a ploy for attention that backfired tastelessly. Common question, why are we friends? Sally is married to one of my best friends. As my friend has elected to stay married to her, I have tolerated her. I wouldn't call her a friend, but we are where we are. Comment, I'm loving the responses here. I truly empathize with those living with medically restrictive diets. Life is hard enough without that being added into the mix. This is funny and I'm sharing it with Sally's husband. He needs to get some first-hand knowledge of all the reasons claiming false dietary restrictions just isn't okay. And I want to be clear, never tamper with someone's food. This malicious compliance worked because no harm could come to Sally. This is John from Slashbash. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video and want to be the first to know when the next one drops, then subscribe and make sure you click on the notifications bell so that YouTube will actually show you my videos. We'd love for you to drop a like, share it with your friends, and we will see you in the next one.